Yeah, so I'm coming to you guys from Biripi Nation, so on the mid-north coast. We're very, very lucky to be in such a beautiful country. And my name's Pip, I'm an OT, and I am the CEO of AllTogether Therapy. I am also the co-convener of the private practice Early Childhood Intervention Community Practice, which is a group of private practitioners that have come together to really ensure that we can provide the best services to children and help advocate for what children and families deserve and have the right to access.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think my least favourite thing is talking about myself, but I'll have a go. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from where I'm speaking, which is the Wurundjeri country in Victoria, and I would like to acknowledge leaders past, present and emerging. So I'm Muriel, I'm also an OT, I'm a parent of neurodiverse children, and I wear a few hats in this space, and I would just like to say I am on the committee of Every Australian Counts. I'm also work with ARATA, and today I'm speaking wearing my OTSi hat, which is the OT Society for Invisible and Hidden Disabilities. So that's OTSi for short, and what we do is we support wherever it might be needed, access to support for those groups who have hidden and invisible disabilities. We do that through an OT lens. So we do have that, I guess, voice as well. So we sort of see ourselves as a voice for people with hidden and invisible disability and access to support, and with that OT lens in particular.
So for allied health, there are a few. So we are now heading into our 7th year of a price freeze for OT and speech pathology and some other allied healths. For other allied health, like podiatry and dietetics, they're seeing $5 an hour decrease in their funding. Physios is $10 an hour less. Psychology is getting a slight increase. And the other big impact in regards to the hourly rate is that the rural and remote loading is being removed. That will have a significant impact for those in Western Australia, Northern Territory and Northern Queensland, who have those loadings that will no longer have that. Some of those therapists in those areas will see a $40 decrease in their hourly rate. Their businesses will not be sustainable. Yeah.
Which is actually, I'll just jump in really quickly, which is a huge proportion of allied health, Sarah. And when we looked at our community of practice, we did a survey last year, we found that 60% of allied health in our community are really small practices. So they're less than 5 staff. So they're your very, very local community. They live in your communities, they practice in your communities, kids go to school in the community. They're drawn to do that work because of flexibility. Flexibility was the number one reason why OTs in particular work in small practices and do NDIS work, and they want to do with innovation. And so that's the group we're really talking about here that are going to be most impacted.
And so, like Sarah said, that $5, it doesn't sound like a much, but if you've got a therapist that's billing 5 hours out of a 7.5 hour day, which is around what's typical, that is over $5,000 a year. Like, that's only on 42 weeks a year, so that needs to accommodate for things like annual leave, sick leave that you don't get paid for if you're a sole provider or an employer has to cover. So $5,000. Absolutely, you have to pay all of that. You have to still pay tax. There is a lot. $5,000 is what covers our insurances for a year. It is a lot of money. And then for physio, that's $10,000. And then we put, like, I'm not even very good at math. So, but if you make that $40 an hour reduction, that is significant to a small business. That is the difference between someone's wage. That means that that business closes and that professional that is worked themselves to the point of not being able to feed their family or sustain, their lifestyle in that business, they close and they will get a job elsewhere. It might be in health promotion, it might be for the health department, but it means that we are losing experienced therapists that are currently able to provide services to people with disability. That's the hard thing, right? And I've heard a lot of people go, oh, well, they'll just go work for big organisations or they'll go work to health. There is a large percentage of these small businesses where the professional either has their own disability or identifies as neurodiverse or, is a single mum or has other social contexts which don't allow them to work for a big organisation or a government department. Absolutely. Sorry. 100%. Yes, all good. But they won't work. They will actually remove themselves from this. I have therapists that have quite clearly said to me, I'll be done. I will either retire early or I will find a job in another field. Muriel, was there any stats on that last year?
I think it's a really good question, Sarah. So we know that of the whole NDIS workforce, 22% did not work before the NDIS. So that's huge. It's almost a quarter. So if we substantially change the NDIS, which is what's happening now, and this is part of that change, then what does that mean for that 22% of the entire NDIS workforce, which includes allied health? So we would love to understand who that group are, that 22%, almost a quarter, who potentially couldn't, but didn't work before the NDIS. What we are thinking is that is because the NDIS brought such flexible work arrangements, very local work where people could work in their own communities, contribute to their own communities, provide really innovative ways of working in their own communities that maybe they couldn't before the NDIS. So potentially 22% of the entire workforce will not be able to work in future if there's substantial change. And we just need to understand that because we would love the powers that be really engage with the community to understand that, because I don't think there's been enough work done to understand what reforms mean and the impact they'll have on NDIS workforce, NDIS participants and access to support. There's very clearly a big picture plan in mind by our governments. We don't know what that is. That is not transparent. That has not been articulated. We're sort of being given these little changes, another little change, and another little cut, and another little cut, until soon we have this thing that is no longer the NDIS that everyone fought so hard for. So, what I would say to decision makers and our government, show us your hand, show us your plan. As my kids' teacher would say, show us you're working out. Share your thinking, because you haven't done that yet. Another really good question. I think I think potentially they're worried if they shared it with us, the community might really react to that in a way that they may not be happy about. But you know what? Secrecy doesn't really work. The community understand there's big changes. We would like to understand what that big picture change is. So, please spell it out for us, because it's the lives of people with disabilities. It's the lives of the people who work to support people with disabilities that are going to be impacted here. So we really do need to know what that plan is and understand it. Thank you, Sarah. Well, I think, and I want to acknowledge, it's not always easy to access support currently for families, and that there is often wait lists, and we know that's been a challenge. But what we know with these changes is that it's going to become so much harder. There really is going to be, I guess, even just this, what might seem like a small change, changing the travel for allied health and therapists, might seem like a small change, but when we unpack it and the impact on what it might mean for the workforce, it's really, really huge. Because like you say, Sarah, what will be left? There will be a lot of local providers gone from local communities. There may be some providers that, you know, will you access them by telehealth? Will that work for your child and your family? It doesn't work for everyone. Going to a clinic, well, you know, the NDIS was never meant to be a clinic-based model. It was always meant to be real lives, real places, real environments for people. And that's, you know, that's why travel became such a big part of the NDIS for families and for the workforce too, is because we know that therapy works best in natural environments. So if therapists can't come out to your home, can't come to your community, can't come and see your child at that sports club, then what's that going to mean for school as well? What's that going to mean for, you know, the, I guess, effectiveness really of therapy, as well as the access to therapy? So there's going to be a lot of impacts on therapy and therapists and participants and outcomes for participants, all of those things. What will be left is a really good question, Sarah. I don't think there'll be much left at all if these changes progress. We'll be left with sort of a really inaccessible system, and maybe even collapse of the current systems of support. We'll certainly...
Yeah, this is such a huge, huge factor, Sarah, truthfully. Like, schools and teachers are already under such enormous pressure to reach academic goals and everything else with high class numbers, and then trying to meet the needs of the children that they support. They're just not coping at the moment. As a result, we're seeing a soar in the number of children that are being removed from mainstream schooling and are being taken out, homeschooled. We have, you know, lots of private distance eds starting just to allow these children to have their needs met. At school, a lot of these children aren't having their basic needs met. The school, eating, toileting, connection, regulation, connection, safety. It's not a place that they want to be, and they feel absolutely not. It's a resourcing issue. It's also an education and awareness issue. You know, when we have a department that is still years behind when it comes to supporting these children and understanding how children with disabilities across, you know, the whole spectrum of needs, whether it be neurodivergence, whether it be physical disabilities, there is such a big lack of awareness and knowledge at the moment. Okay. Which is a Absolutely. Like, I know, especially with the legislative changes last year, and I think every time a price guide recommendation comes out, it does end up being a little bit about providers versus participants. Unfortunately, there's always media about, oh, you know, the OTs that have the beach house and the beautiful big deck. It's no, exactly. Like, yeah, we're talking about the family-run businesses. We're talking about the families that are giving, like, you know, the parents that are giving up their time with their children to build a sustainable and best practice business that otherwise children wouldn't be able to access. Okay. As a small business owner, I can say personally, these practices put everything, they put their whole life into this because they are so passionate about providing the best service that they can. You know, we do so much behind the scenes that isn't paid, whether that be professional development, supervision, development of our businesses. That is all a significant amount of time, energy, and money. There is not these huge profit margins that perceived. And I think it's really important at the moment because emotions are so high, so many people are angry and frustrated. It's easy to go for providers to just arc out and participants to do the same. And I think it's really important that families, individuals, providers, everyone works together. Because we do have a common.
Thanks, Sarah. I was just reflecting as you were speaking on the independent assessment campaign, which many people would have been part of. You know, it was in 2021, I think, and I think it was just such a great example of everyone coming together, you know, everyone feeling like this is a change that's actually going to have negative impacts for people with disability, and everyone got behind it. You know, we had providers, we had disabled persons organizations, we had a whole lot of grassroots people coming together to sort of say, well, hang on a minute, this was not what we had in mind when we built an NDIS. And I think we're back at a moment like that now. You know, we're really at such risk, like you said, Sarah, of losing the vision for that NDIS that was meant to be about choice and control, people living lives just like any other Australian. So, you know, if we want that to continue, we have to get together and we have to fight for it, because there's never been such huge risks to it, really. And I know so many groups feel really nervous to say that out loud, and I can understand why. You know, there's some very, very powerful players, forces pushing change in a direction that is not what the community want. And if we want to hold on to what we've got, then we've all got to work together and have a voice for it.